Hi, I'm Jenny Davis, and today I'll be talking about my position paper prompted by this workshop's theme of empathy beyond the individual. As a sociologist, this theme really resonates with me. The sociological perspective is premised on the idea that individual experiences are always social and that microprocesses necessarily reflect and inform social patterns and structures. Against this backdrop, I'll make the case that HCI's attention to structural factors and variables exceeds empathy's scope, and that role-taking, a concept from sociology, is better suited to HCI purposes. My main claim in this position paper is that role-taking is preferable to empathy as a theoretical scaffold for participatory co-design within HCI research and practice. Human-computer interaction, or HCI, and psychology are long-time disciplinary affiliates, and for good reason. Psychological theories predict and explain mental, emotional, and interpersonal dimensions of the human experience. HCI researchers draw on those theories to illuminate human-machine relations, the social implications of hardware, software, and interface design, and the interpersonal dynamics between designers and real or imagined user publics. It's from this disciplinary pairing between psychology and HCI that concepts like empathy and perspective taking have risen to the fore, serving as both objects of study and targets of intervention, with particular prominence in participatory co-design. Although enduring and prolific, the relationship between HCI and psychology is necessarily limited by the individualized focus of psychological approaches vis-a-vis HCI's socio-structural foundations. Human-computer interaction is at its core a social process suffused by structural factors that inform both technical design and interpersonal interaction. Participatory co-design is premised on a commitment to community stakeholders and recognition of lived experience as essential expertise. This commitment is part of a broader ethic underpinning co-design through community-based participatory research, which seeks to reconfigure power relations between participants and practitioners. This principle of community empowerment drives best practices in co-design, such that end products will reflect community stakeholder interests. However, such community empowerment does not always materialize. Co-design contexts can, and often do, inadvertently re-entrench normative social hierarchies and mechanisms of privilege. Role-taking is a structural process premised on mutual recognition of interrelated role positions and their situatedness within socially defined communities and contexts. Within role-taking theory, each interaction and each person in that interaction are defined by the combination of situationally relevant roles. In this way, social encounters are not remade anew, nor are individuals treated as unique entities. Rather, social interactions are structured by shared templates for self, other, and situation. The current state of role-taking theory adheres to a self and self model in which role-taking is defined as the process and practice of symbolically placing the self in the social position of others, imagining others' thoughts and feelings, being moved by others' emotions, and predicting others' behaviors. Within this formulation, perspective taking represents a cognitive dimension to role-taking, and empathy represents an affective dimension. Specifically, perspective taking is a process and practice of thinking with the other, assessing the other's thoughts and feelings, and predicting their behaviors. Empathy refers to feeling with the other, being moved by the other's perceived emotions. As part of the self and self model, perspective taking and empathy are represented as mind in mind and heart in heart, respectively. This model thus encompasses the psychological processes of perspective taking and empathy, enveloping them into a socio-structural whole. A key question in role-taking research pertains to the conditions under which role-taking is enhanced or diminished. Across multiple laboratory survey and crowdsourced studies, the central finding has been that high status and power decreases role-taking performance, while low status and power enhances role-taking performance. Status here refers to social esteem and perceived competence, and power refers to control over resources and decision-making. In short, people who are esteemed in society and those who have control over resources and decision-making are less inclined to consider others' thoughts and feelings, whereas those who are dependent within the social structure and within an interaction situation are more attentive to others' thoughts and feelings. In this vein, people who have high status and power are more likely to have their thoughts and feelings attended to within interaction situations, whereas those with less status and power are more likely to have their experiences dismissed or ignored. The empirical insight that role-taking is shaped by status and power is valuable to HCI researchers when considering community-based co-design. Co-design protocols have to be attentive to status and power relations in order for community voices to meaningfully translate into design outputs, especially when collaborating with socially marginalized and minoritized groups, as is often the case with participatory research. Users from the social margins are doubly disadvantaged in the context of design, as they're less likely to be reflected in prototypical defaults and less attended to during interactional encounters like those that constitute co-design sessions. Role-taking can sensitize HCI practitioners to these social patterns while informing interventions to address them. Okay, so there's two main reasons to shift from empathy to role-taking as the underlying framework for co-design processes. First is accuracy and precision, and second is the evidence-based practical adjustments role-taking facilitates, attending to asymmetries of status and power within the co-design encounter. Shifting to role-taking is thus a generative move for HCI as a field committed to meaningful incorporation of users' voices, and in particular, inclusivity for those who have been historically marginalized and/or excluded. In these ways, role-taking dovetails with best practices in community-based research, scaffolding those practices with a multidimensional sociological model. Okay, so let's dig into those reasons a little bit, and let's begin with the issue of conceptual precision. Role-taking rather than empathy more accurately describes the goals and practices of co-design, while role-taking's multifaceted definition, which includes both affect and cognition, specifies where, how, and to what extent empathy and perspective taking are at play. Recall role-taking's structural underpinnings, in which attention to others' thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are predicated on shared understanding of interrelated social roles rather than the unique inner lives of specific individuals. Co-design is about listening to and understanding the participants involved in co-design activities, but with the larger purpose of understanding and accommodating stakeholders like those specific participants, that is, those who occupy similar social roles. Unless a technological system is one-off and bespoke, which is unusual, the co-design process is about optimizing role-taking as conceived sociologically rather than empathy as conceived psychologically. This relates to another matter, which is how empathy is conceptualized. Within psychology, empathy is a saturated concept, besieged by so many meanings it's difficult to pin down what exactly one's striving for, indicating measuring when empathy is set as the target. Role-taking helps resolve this issue by tightly scoping empathy as an affective component within a broader structural process, defining in clear terms its distinction from the cognitive process of perspective taking. Role-taking is thus a more accurate and specific approach to HCI than is empathy, with the former benefiting co-design protocols and sharpening measures of efficacy. Okay, so now let's get into status and power, right? So not only does role-taking offer definitional accuracy and clarity to co-design practice, its structural approach and related empirical evidence illuminate the fallibilities of co-design methods and provide a theoretical overlay for best practices. Co-design is inflected by status and power imbalances, whereby designers possess both esteem and authority in a way that community participants do not. Role-taking research alerts us to the effects of these status and power asymmetries. In particular, we can expect status and power to diminish role-taking capacities such that design teams and user experience researchers will face sociological barriers to understanding, integrating, and implementing input from community participants. We can expect this effect to amplify when community participants are from marginalized groups like people with disabilities, elderly populations, stakeholders of color, people experiencing economic precarity, and those at the intersections of these and other axes of inequity, a problem that has long plagued HCI practitioners whose efforts at co-design too often reproduce normative social hierarchies. Evidence from the role-taking research program can sensitize HCI practitioners to issues of status or esteem and power or control in co-design encounters, while at the same time suggesting modes of correction. Role-taking studies show that adjustments to status and power relations within an interaction situation can undo asymmetries in role-taking performance. For example, when women are placed in leadership positions, the men with whom they interact role-take with those women more actively and accurately than they do with women in non-leadership positions, with similar results in studies of role-taking between Black women and white women, where race and leadership roles serve as intersecting status markers. This means that changing the definition of a situation can change how well people role-take. Applied to HCI co-design methods, these findings indicate that elevating community participants' status and granting them meaningful forms of power within co-design sessions will enhance the role-taking environment. These dynamics are, of course, already understood by HCI researchers and they're fully embedded within community-based participatory research standards. However, they lack a cogent theoretical underpinning and are thus at risk of inadequate implementation. So in the paper, I illustrate my point through engagement with a selection of empathy-based co-design methods and protocols. These are envisioning cards, community juries, and transcreative interviews. Looking at how each are described and implemented, I suggest subtle adjustments based on a holistic role-taking approach. Across cases, this entails deliberate moves to elevate community participant status and power within the co-design context. I don't have time to go into each example here, but I've displayed the relevant table for reference and encourage people to check out the paper to dive into the examples and try, if you're interested, applying similar adjustments to protocols that are common in your own intellectual and professional practice. To summarize, I propose role-taking as a generative framework for HCI co-design, moving beyond empathy as an individualized and psychologically grounded approach. Role-taking is a sociological process of understanding, connecting to, and acting upon others' thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. It entails comprehensive attention to interrelated and contextually situated social roles, rather than the inner lives of specific individual subjects. More so than empathy, role-taking comports with best practices in co-design, especially community-based participatory research, where the purpose is to serve a diversity of user publics, attending to the needs, aspirations, and vulnerabilities of social roles those user publics occupy. Within role-taking's formulation, empathy is not lost, but conceptually and operationally scoped as the affective element of a structural whole, interrelated with cognitive processes of perspective-taking. Role-taking is thus an accurate reflection of HCI co-design goals while offering theoretical precision and specificity. Beyond this, role-taking structural focus and the empirical evidence from role-taking studies elucidate the ways status and power figure into co-design practices, fostering adaptations that alleviate asymmetries and enhance meaningful inclusion of community perspectives. Although presented here as an argument in position, this work sets the stage for testable hypotheses in which adaptations to existing HCI protocols in line with role-taking theory can be assessed for efficacy in both the co-design experiences of community participants and their satisfaction with co-design products. More broadly, the work brings together sociology and HCI, enhancing both disciplines through the pairing. Thanks so much. Please get in touch with questions.